It's The Executive Edge with Sue Firth. The podcast that gives you an edge in life and business with practical skills that you can apply to achieve and maintain success.
Welcome everyone to this week's episode of The Executive Edge. Now it's absolutely brilliant because I have an excellent guest today for you. This is Karen Brown. And Karen, I know you've got a brilliant business. Let's find out all about you. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Sue. Thrilled to be here. I'm a big fan of your show.
Well, thank you. I always love anybody to say that, actually, because it's funny. I mean, obviously, podcasts exist all over the world and there's hundreds of thousands of them. And I think sometimes distinguishing yourself, which I'm sure you must be able to find is also the same in business, is actually quite tricky to do. You know what you want to do and you're passionate about it, but being able to convince other people can be quite difficult. Now, you've had an experience of this both through your athletics and your endurance, you know, the whole process of the sports that you were part of. So let's tell us a little bit more about you. Tell me all about you, really.
Oh, gosh. Well, now I guess I think of myself as the blindspot champion. And we can get into more of that later about blind spots and how they work in terms of leadership development. But long story short, I grew up in Colorado and had a penchant for athletics. That's not to say that I was naturally a good athlete. I just was tenacious and stubborn. And I grew up learning and playing a variety of different sports. Really loved them, mostly individual endeavors, but also played team sports and found that I was pretty good. That is to say, mediocre at probably all of them.
I doubt it, but go on.
Yeah. And then took an interest in getting into the corporate world and in business, and started climbing the corporate ladder pretty quickly. Very ambitious and even competitive, I'll say. And so was an aspiring, well, I'll say a great individual performer turned into an aspiring leader, and then began ascending into senior leadership. So in total, I was in that space for about 20 years. And during that time, two things happened. Number one, I had this lifelong dream that sort of set itself in my brain, deep in my brain, when I was 14 years old. And that dream was to compete in the Ironman World Championships in Hawaii. And then the second thing that happened is I started looking around for what the difference maker was in leadership development. All the things that I was seeing, all the methodologies that I was exposed to were slow and arduous and impermanent. And being a very impatient person, I wanted something that was fast and highly effective and permanent. So I was sort of always on the lookout for what that was. And in my formal pursuit of the Ironman, I found it in neuroscience. So then I parlayed all of that together, the education, the experience, the client experience, and also my personal experience, sort of testing it all out.
I love that, and thank you. I think if we just unpack that just for a little, I think first of all, what you're probably able to pick up really from quite a young age is that you're a very focused, disciplined person with a lot of grit, but also what we would call now grip, which is the ability to hang on in there and persist even despite errors, mistakes, and potential for or risk of failure. And I think that comes with the territory, without a doubt, and I'm sure you will have seen this too, of an exec, because often when they start and they're owner managers or they want to get very senior, the only way they're going to be able to do that, male and female equally, is by driving hard for what they want. So the second thing that you've got to know is what the heck I want. Because I think anything which does end up with uncertainty, although you described it as mediocre, I can't imagine a single thing you've done as mediocre, but there is a risk that you don't end up achieving what it is that you truly want. So from your point of view, I think you've seen a lot of evidence that wherever you set yourself something, you've actually gone for it, even if it does seem really pretty amazing. And obviously, quite a few of the things that you set yourself pushed you damned hard.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So I wrote a book about this called Unlimiting Your Beliefs by Karen Brown. It's available on Amazon. And I wanted to share it for that very reason, that I knew when I shared my story with others that it would be assumed or presumed that I was this naturally talented, fast athlete, and that all of this came really easily and naturally to me. And it couldn't be more opposite. I got knocked down hard a lot. There were a lot of really tough lessons and tough words and big learnings. And ultimately, they did lead to victories and triumphs, but it's really all about what we learn through failure and how we choose to get up again and try a different way and just keep on trying until we get there.
Until you get what you want, isn't it? So really I found quite interesting as I was reading about you was that, during all of those formative years, you discovered something which you've called blind spots. Now, I've come across the expression before, but usually in relation to somebody who, say, only gets so far in business and then somehow doesn't manage to make it any further and doesn't recognize that some of that is the blind spots that they're putting in their way. They're not seeing something, for example. Their effusive and overly loud personality is not actually going to be the bit that will make everybody think they're a professional. So they think it's funny and it isn't. Now, in what context do you mean blind spots? What did you feel that it was about?
In the context I'm talking about is within neuroscience and the scientific data that shows how all of our brains work, which is in something called behavioral patterns. Behavioral patterns are created in our subconscious mind to get us something that we say or think that we want. And then because they're created in our subconscious mind, we just run them without knowing or recognizing them consciously until coaches like us can point them out. And so what I found through that whole journey that I talked about before is that this is the real game changer in our DNA, in our brains, if you will, that when you can recognize your blind spots, it is a faster, more permanent, more accelerated path to exponential results.
Right. And that obviously is how you develop the name of the business, which is fantastic. Got you. So in a way, really, what you recognize was that there are limits in perhaps the way we behave, or we limit ourselves because we get in our own way, or neural pathways that get very established, which are almost like a default for us behaviorally. And before you tell us, if you like, which I'm sure is brilliant, how it is that you swap that around and what parts or elements of neuroscience fix that, because I sense, as you said, you wanted something permanent, not something temporary, which is the risk of the way some interventions are. What kind of thing did you see or feel was getting in your way when it came to these blind spots? Was it you telling yourself, well, I may as well give up then? Or what was it that you found yourself saying to yourself that developed your own personal?
The biggest thing that was getting in my way was something called limiting beliefs, AKA why I wrote the book. Because limiting beliefs, if you think about it, it's really, so it went like this for me, and I'm sure your listeners can relate. I would think about competing in the Ironman World Championships. And then my immediate thought after that was, oh, well, wait a minute. The competitors that are there are elite. They're up here. And I'm recreational. I'm way down here. There's no way that I'm going to be able to do that. That is a limiting belief. And it's simply a leftover trait in our operating system from when we were evolving. And it really was just developed to keep us safe, right? If we were trying to do something new or different or even somewhat dangerous, our subconscious brain would kick in and go, okay, fight or flight, you've got to make a decision here. and judge what this is and if it can kill me, all in an effort to just survive another day.
Yeah, and you're right, really, because the primitive survival mechanism has a purpose, but what it's going to do is kick in, which sabotages your efforts at times, whether it comes through an instant thought process or just I'm tired, I don't want to go out training, I really should do, I need to, it's going to make a difference, or even nothing will make a difference. So it can expand almost if you let it. It can reduce if you know how. So how do we reduce it if we know how? This is the neuroscience bit. What do we do?
Right. So first of all, we have to come into contact with it. We have to become aware enough, usually through our programs, our coaching work, in terms of one-on-one or in teams. We have to become aware of it. And that comes from a certified and very experienced coaches like us asking the right questions. So we hone in on neurolinguistics, which is the science of words, and that reveals what's going on for the client. Then we can ask a question to dive more deeply in and open that up. And then therefore revealing the behavioral pattern or the blind spot that's at work there.
Right. And the beauty thing, sorry, really quickly, the beautiful thing is, if it's a blind spot, that's the whole point. You don't know it's there, really. You don't realize that you're hooked into it and that it's taking you on a rinse-repeat pattern to the point where you're actually getting in your own way. You kind of know something is wrong, but you probably don't know quite what it is that you're doing, or even feel very, as you so beautifully put it, powerful in order to be able to change it. So the beauty is, if you get the right coach who unearths that for you, then you suddenly realize this amazing recognition and touch point all the way back to wherever you first got it from, because usually behavior is learned, copied, or you're told. So somewhere along the line you've picked this up. That does not make it fact.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yes, but because of the way that we think about it, we think that it's factual. It's not. It's manufactured. You're right. I was listening to a previous show that you did with somebody else, and you were talking about fear and fearlessness, and that fear is learned. Anxiety is learned, right? Limiting beliefs are learned. They are picked up and then created somewhere along the line to help us out. And that's the only reason. So when you start working with someone who is certified in this stuff and can recognize behavioral patterns very, very quickly, it becomes very easy to become self-aware of them and go, oh, okay, yeah, now I see it. Now I see the pattern that I've experienced over time in multiple different situations or settings. Now this makes sense.
And this is what I'm doing. Yeah, that makes sense too. Are there some very common ones? So do your coaches find that there are 2 or 3 or 4 that are very common? Because I can imagine they must do.
I would say every single one that we uncover is very common.
Right.
Because that is to say, every single one of us has blind spots. There's not anybody that doesn't have any. But I would say in the executive world, the executive space, first of all, delegation is probably a big one. Now there's a small segment, I would say, of the executive population that will delegate readily, but I would say the majority of the executive population won't. They hold themselves back in that task in some way, and it always ties back to a blind spot of theirs. Also, they manage their time. Again, there's huge blind spots that exist in this, and we've got to get to the depths of the rabbit hole, to really unwind that. You could even call it programming, if you will. I call it an identity update, which is say you're newly promoted into a new role, and maybe it's a big jump. Maybe you went from a senior sort of manager into presidential level or C-suite level. This is the biggest blind spot I see within that, which is you're still operating with this old identity of being a senior manager, and this is who I am, and this is what I do, and this is how I do it, right? Then when I ask, okay, what does a president act like? What do they do on a daily basis? How do they bring out the best performance from their team? How do they leverage high performance and bring out everyone's best amongst their now much larger team? And usually they are completely stymied. They go back to their job description and they struggle, to find a few things. And then I say, okay, I think we need to update your identity into this new role. Who do you need to be? Who are you going to be within this role to be successful?
Yeah, that's brilliant, because I think you're spot on. I think so many of us don't realize that this identity is actually all about the way we think. I think we assume someone else put it there for us, and it's called a job description. Therefore, as long as we do those tasks with that person, and that could be a leader or a senior manager, and therefore it would be in a certain sector, and we forget about our knowledge and our talent and our extreme, unique qualities that we're bringing to it. And we pack all of those away on the basis, no, everybody else does the same job as us or something similar. So I think we throw it out of the way. The other thing which is interesting is Bob Proctor, who you probably well know and remember was in the self-development and self-help sort of sector. He called this whole thing about the way we think and getting in our own way paradigms. But there were two problems with that for me. Firstly, I think he always had to explain the concept of paradigms because it never made any sense to anyone. And they were always asking. If you simply swap that out and say your own personal beliefs, it becomes a heck of a sight easier to understand. And I also think you're spot on that he never really offered, what do you do with that? How do you correct that? What does it need to become instead? Although intuitively, it wasn't rocket science to work out that's going to get in my way.
Right.
Now, you obviously went on the hunt, as you said, and therefore your experience in neuroscience and your study of that then underpinned what it is that you and your coaches are able to offer people. So obviously in business, are you still much the same as you were when you were doing all your triathlons? Are you basically just as driven, focused, with as much grit?
What a great question, Sue. I am just as driven and focused in a different way now. Through my Ironman and ultra international athletic journey, I was able to find what I'm truly capable of. What that revealed is that I'm capable of anything that I can dream up. We all are. We all are extraordinary in this way. We are all capable of anything we can visualize, anything we can imagine, we can actually do it. So now on the athletic side, I just do really fun things that I think are fun, like training for a singular marathon or skiing or fitness boxing, things like that are relatively short, compared to the multi-day, multi-100-mile events that I used to do.
Yeah, very, very sensible. Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, I think one of the difficulties is that it begins to cross a boundary. If it's there in your life to that degree, it crosses over a boundary, which needs such a lot of time, such a lot of commitment, and it can either work in your favor because obviously you feel super fit, but you have to be available. So time planning, commitment, the pressure of that, possibly having other pulls on what it is that you want to achieve means it becomes a juggling act, and sometimes plate spinning is less attractive than it sounds. So one of the other things that you've also done, apart from your book, which you mentioned, and thank you, Unlimiting Your Beliefs, 7 Keys to Greater Success, we know now to be available on Amazon. But you also talked ahead of coming on the show about something which is interesting. You called it the new portrait of leadership. Now tell me a bit more about that.
So this goes right into blind spots because there's a couple of them that I would add to the list of the most common blind spots that we see. And this is a list of 6, so I'm going to just list them all quickly, and then we can dive into, whatever 1 or 2 of them we have time for. And they are in, I think, order of importance. Number 1 is self-awareness. We talked about that a little bit in becoming self-aware of your blind spots, but this is the number 1 that I see as the difference between a mediocre leader and a masterful one, and has to do with feedback. And then number 2 is authenticity, being an authentic leader. Number 3 is working on yourself. Quite often I see leaders who say they have gotten that big promotion and they're now in C-suite or similar level. They say, well, I'm good now. I've arrived. And it's everyone else that needs work. Not true. Number 4 is consistency, to align your words and your actions. This is a big thing that we're seeing in the marketplace right now, where there's a disconnection, there's an incongruency with words and actions. Number 5 is speak kind truths. This is a biggie, and really goes into a lot of Patrick Lencioni's work, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and that whole team ascension pyramid. And number 6 is navigate conflict productively. It's epidemic. It's another epidemic that people are shying away from conflict, or they just don't even get into it. And this is where the gold of transformation and relationships and productivity lies.
This makes a lot of sense. I think also that a lot of people make assumptions about what someone else thinks or feels, and therefore they won't have the conversation for fear that it will reach conflict. And yet there's no point making loads of assumptions. I've learned this to my own cost. It makes it very easy to assume that a certain type of behavior that you're seeing means X, Y, or Z. And actually, you can't know that unless you check it out. We come back to the fact that what you see and what you think is not a fact.
Right. You're just applying your own filters, your own experience, your own knowledge to try to figure out why the other person is doing what they're doing or what their behavior means. And we've tracked this. 99% of the time, you're wrong.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's a great statistic. But I know this to my cost because, my father was a very volatile man, and therefore I used to go to great lengths to avoid having any kind of a true conversation that might risk him kicking off, because his temper was not fun. And so, you learn to walk on eggshells, you learn not to bring something up, or you learn to behave in a certain way in order to avoid this, in friends and family ever since. Now, I've got better, but I've had to work on it. And I think in business, again, we confuse business from family, because family will never go away. So there's less of a risk that they're going to get offended and therefore storm out and you'll never see them again. Although I appreciate the fact that you still get breakdown in relationships. But business seems to matter such a lot. People risk not having an honest conversation, and then they fail to take advantage of the fact that clearing the air and getting it straight is so much easier. Then you know what you're doing, really.
Well, what we work through and actually train teams on and leaders on in conflict, productive conflict, is that, first of all, there's a mapping of behavior that needs to happen. And notice I said mapping or an inventory, not an assessment. I hate assessments, because assessments are assessing your behavior compared to something else, a mean, an average, an aspiration, something. I think that's the wrong direction to go. Really, all that needs to happen for there to be increased awareness and opening and then change, transformation even, is for us to become aware of our current behavior and then look at what it's getting us, compare that to what we'd rather have, and then make changes and improvements accordingly. So in this particular program, we map everybody on the team's behavior. And what it shows is everyone has a unique conflict sequence, what those mean. And each of us is unique in the way we move through conflict. But here's the fascinating part. Once you actually see how you move through conflict and how each one of your teammates moves through it, all these light bulbs go on. Every team that we've done this with goes, oh my gosh, how in the world did you know that? That's exactly what plays out here. That's exactly what I do. That's exactly what I think. How did you possibly know that? Okay, because we've mapped it out. So then we can work with companies and make note, unproductive conflict costs companies $535 billion a year. So this is a great place to make strides in.
Isn't it just?
then it's the same thing as blind spots, because these are blind spots. So once we all become aware of our blind spots, then we can navigate them better.
And how did they work out that it costs that much? Would that be a portion of the population who have basically been doing productive work until they find it untenable to be able to stay and they leave, and therefore it's the replacement costs for that person? How do they work that out?
Well, it's either they leave or it's the unproductivity that ensues while they're still there. That the team member that just pulls back from engagement, they avoid conflict at all costs. They're very unhappy. They're far less productive and engaged. And that also starts to poison the culture. Yeah, so all of those factors were taken into consideration in that measurement.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because again, we always imagine someone else is doing that. We always imagine it's someone else's fault, or that there's someone who is not happy, but that's what's changing the culture. It's not me. It's not me not bringing something up. It's not me not dealing with something. And often at exec level, they are quite removed. So they've got a number of layers of management, and therefore perhaps that someone's not honest enough or brave enough to come tell them either. And particularly if you're the primary cause because you're too autocratic, too driven, too pushy, too something. And, people mistake, I think, that I got here through those skills, therefore surely they're relevant now. Well, actually, not necessarily, because other people aren't valuing those as their primary way of getting on. You're creating conflict in the business. Yeah, it's a curious thing how we imagine everything is okay because that's how I got here.
Exactly. Yeah, it's because you've experienced past successes doing things the way you do them. So then subconsciously you just think, oh yeah, so I don't need to change anything. I'm all good. It's everybody else's fault. But that's the thing we see, and that we will actually speak into that very readily. We will give that executive open feedback, and we'll speak the truth to them and say, hey, you have a contribution to this. Maybe it's even larger than you believe that it is because you're the CEO, because you're the executive.
But I think, that's kind of the conflict side of things. And we said that there were 6 altogether. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is the awareness piece, the self-awareness piece that you brought up. And then I think also there is the authenticity, which is terribly important, being authentic. But in its own way, you also mentioned something a bit earlier, which I see a lot of evidence. It's I am going to do as I say. So this disparity between what I say and what I do often creates quite a lot of contradictory messages within a business. That's how people pick up this behavior is okay. No, actually, it might not be. And similar sort of disconnects. And so the disconnects exist almost all over the place, don't they, really, in business?
Yes, absolutely. Because that disconnect between you not doing what you say, that causes people to feel unsettled and then unsafe. And then they're not going to do their best work in an unsafe environment. They're not going to confide in you. They're not going to share with you, their thoughts and their troubles. And, this is exactly the team member that will surprise you one day because they walk in and give you their resignation. And you never knew that they were looking.
And yet, you and I would say, at least start having some brave conversations with the people that you truly value. Because if you don't know what's going on inside their own heads, you can't even help them to feel good or feel better or feel whatever it is or correct whatever it is. Let's just say it also is then reliant on their ability to be able to tell you how they feel. But at least start with that question. So from the sound of things, there's a great deal to be gained from going through your process. How do people approach you? What's the first step?
The first step is we establish the goals that we want to work on. So what do we want to achieve? No more than 5. And we pick out and decide the 5 most powerful things that once we work on them and transform them, they're going to have the biggest impact on that leader, their team, and the organization. Then we also attach target due dates of completion, metrics of measurement. So we developed a proprietary client portal years ago that clients actually rave about. It's sort of a work repository for all the work that we do. We can have a constant dialogue going back and forth on how the work is going. And the coach can actually see, what they're working on, how that's coming along. And we're measuring everything as we go, mostly progress and how we're doing in comparison to achievement of that goal. And then actions, we solidify actions and track them in the system as well. So it just is a wonderful way to organize the work. And in my mind, this is why we developed it, to make the work as easy as is possible. Now, that's not to say that it's easy, but it makes it as simple and straightforward as possible. And remember, we're working with executives, right? They're all super busy. So, they don't have time to be, engaging in 10 hours of coaching work a week. So this has to be really efficient and really effective.
Got you. But yet you're right, except that there is an anomaly in that, because actually they're so driven and they do love goals. So the beauty is, if you can capture a process that tracks their goals, they will pay attention to it. They will hook into it, and then they will see that they're making progress. And at the end of the day, everybody loves progress, don't they? So, and what was striking me quite forcefully when we were talking was that I would say this is also for, even people who are owner managers and therefore run their own businesses. If you know that you should be charging yourself better, but you're not valuing what it is that you truly do, so you find yourself going into, say, opportunities to talk about your pricing and you routinely underprice, that's exactly the type of thing we're talking about as well. And Karen is telling you in so many words that that's just a limiting belief. You can correct that. That is not a fact. So really, when people track through your stuff now, they're going to see this website that we will make sure that we put up, and they will see your book, which is really great. Thank you. Can they find anything about this new portrait of leadership? Can they hook into where that is? Could you send us a link for that, or anything that will help them pay a bit of attention to reading something?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, the website is your exponential results.com. And, sorry, Sue, go ahead.
No, love it. I just think exponential results is just, it's just a given, isn't it? It's just lovely. Anybody would want that. So go on.
Thank you. Yeah. The article that I mentioned, the new portrait of leadership, is from a contribution that appeared in a major publication. So that is actually on the website as well, along with others. I'm often a contributor to Entrepreneur Magazine, Brains Magazine, Modern Leader, CIO, HR, and CEO magazine. So yeah, you can find all of those articles there. And then also, we have a leadership scorecard that everybody can take if they're interested. Again, it's not an assessment. It's just a scorecard that, gives us a picture of current behavior and then where we can enter into conversations for improvement.
And a dialogue about that, exactly. So, open your minds, open your hearts to the idea that actually you can change something. Open your heart for the first point to the fact that, it is not a closed loop. It is perfectly possible. And we are not talking about neuroplasticity of your brain. We're talking about the fact that you're changing a belief or just a pattern or just a way of thinking. And you know what? I used to say to people, drop all that does not serve you. And I think people knew intuitively what I meant, but I'm not certain they knew how to do it. So the how is definitely the big key here. And I love the fact that they can loop into being able to watch their progress. A progress report on anything is really fantastic. So Karen, it's been an absolute joy being able to talk to you today. Thank you so much indeed for giving us your time on the show.
Oh, massive pleasure being on your show, Sue.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to hear that. Do make sure you come back on again. But for now, we shall make sure we put everything up about you, and I do wish you well with everything. That was excellent. I genuinely felt that Karen knew so much about that. And obviously she'd been through it herself. She had gone through the whole process of being an endurance athlete. And she was finding during the course of that she not only discovered what she was brilliant at, what she was mediocre at, as she said, but also how to correct some of that. And I guess what happens in life is that we just hold ourselves back, or maybe we give up, or maybe we try and do something else. And we never probably have the bravery to stop and work out, do you know what? what? It may be as simple as me. It's down to me. All I have to do is set a different goal or do it in a different way. And I loved the fact that she's got a solution for you in there as well. And that is packed with the neuroscience approach that I know her coaches will be able to correct. So do remind yourself, it's www.yourexponentialresults.com, and you'll find a lot of information on there, and you'll also find it in our podcast notes. So it's been a pleasure, everybody. Take care, and we'll have some really great guests coming up for you very soon. Bye for now.